Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 700 Club. President Trump is now indicating that the U.S. military strikes against Iran could end within a few weeks. He'll give an important update on Iran in a speech to the nation this evening.
Well, the president also says he doesn't need to make a deal with Iran to wrap up the war. Paul Petit has that story from Jerusalem.
President Trump says the end of the war could be in sight, putting a rough timeline on what he calls the final phase of the conflict.
We're finishing the job, and I think within maybe 2 weeks, maybe a couple of days longer to do the job. But we want to knock out every single thing they have. Now, it's possible that we'll make a deal before that.
Trump is also dismissing concerns about Iran's remaining nuclear capabilities, saying what's left is buried and out of reach.
It'll take 15 to 20 years for them to rebuild what we've done to them.
Trump also taking aim at traditional allies, including Britain and France, expressing frustration that they haven't done more to support the war effort. But in the Middle East, the war appears to be having the opposite effect. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says new regional alliances are taking shape.
Not only have we strengthened the alliance with the U.S., but we're also creating new alliances with important countries in the region against the shared Iranian threat. I hope that soon, citizens of Israel, I will be able to tell you more about these vital alliances.
At the same time, the fighting continues on multiple fronts. Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen firing missiles from the south, while Hezbollah keeps up its barrage from the north. Israel's defense minister says the goal now is to permanently change security barriers in Lebanon.
We are determined to separate Lebanon from the Iranian arena, to uproot the snake's teeth and remove from Hezbollah its ability to threaten and to change once and for all the situation in Lebanon with a security presence of the IDF in the necessary locations.
The conflict is now reaching beyond the battlefield. The surveillance video shows the moment an American journalist identified as freelancer Shelley Kittleson was kidnapped in Baghdad. Iraqi forces are now searching for her captors. U.S. officials say they warned Kittleson of the threat and blame an Iran-backed militia. And this new video shows the moment an Iranian missile fragment hit the old city of Jerusalem nearly 2 weeks ago, underscoring threats which have dramatically shifted Easter and Passover here in Jerusalem. Out of safety concerns, Israel's Home Front Command has been limiting events to 50 attendees. And if there's no shelter at those locations, well, the restrictions get even more severe. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the place where many believe Jesus was crucified and resurrected, will remain closed to the general public along with the Western Wall. And the live Easter sunrise service here at the Garden Tomb will not be live. Instead, it was recorded by CBN and will be shown on Sunday, and there will be no public audience. Paul Petit, CBN News from the Garden Tomb in Jerusalem.
All right, Paul, thank you so much. With us now from Jerusalem is our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief, Chris Mitchell. Chris, will Israel keep up its attacks on Iran even if the U.S. pulls out?
Well, Andrew, that's a question that a lot of people here in Israel are asking. It may depend if President Trump makes a deal with the Islamic regime and what would be the stipulations of that deal. Here in Israel, the IDF spokesman says Israel has the munitions, the manpower, and the targets to continue the war. But he said it's up to the political leaders to decide. And obviously, it's President Trump that seems ultimately to be calling the shots. Israel, I'm sure, will go along with President Trump's decision if they would be able to continue the war inside Iran. I would add, Andrew, there's a bit of nervousness here in Israel that the war may stop before the Islamic regime is defeated completely and that they could somehow rise again. And that's also a sense shared by some of Israel's neighbors. Prime Minister Netanyahu alluded to that in his message. But some in the Israeli media say they're not going to be surprised by what Trump says tonight in prematurely ending the war because there's too many unresolved issues. Karg Island would be one, that controls most of Iran's oil. The Strait of Hormuz, which really controls much of the 20% of the world's oils, and then that enriched uranium. But we're all going to see tonight at 9 p.m., Andrew, what President Trump has to say about the war.
Hi, Chris. Paul touched on this a bit in his reporting, but even before the warfare is over, how is this reshaping the Middle East?
You know, Andrew, it's tectonic changes, huge changes. For example, one, Iran is no longer the bully of the Middle East, no longer threatening its neighbors. Even if the war ended today, it's no longer the threat it once was to Israel and its neighbors, the Gulf neighbors especially. And Iran has invested over its span since 1979 nearly $1 trillion and established what many people say is the largest terror enterprise in the world. And now it's being dismantled in just more than a month. You know, and Andrew, looking at all these videos of the infrastructure that's being decimated, you know, from the steel industry to the Navy to the IRGC and Mideast on the streets, it's just stunning to see what's happening. And now the Arab nations, to talk about those changes, are more in alignment with Israel. On the other hand, NATO, which was, you know, doesn't seem to be the partner with the U.S. it once was. It's really been absent, MIA during the war. Trump's threatening to withdraw from NATO. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is saying, why are we in NATO at all? They haven't been able to use the U.S. bases in Europe. On the other hand, China and Russia have been weakened. They're losing in Iran, a strategic partner, a key energy supplier. And it's gone ahead and strengthened the U.S.-Israeli relationship. And finally, Andrew, we see what could be emerging a new economic zone that would be from India to the Middle East through Israel and to Europe, this economic corridor many people are talking about that could come after the war. And then also Israel has really emerged in this war as a regional power, and some would say a global power. Amazing changes ever since October 7th, Andrew. That was the darkest day in the modern history of Israel. And now just a tremendous tectonic change here in the Middle East.
Chris, over these last few weeks, we occasionally hear about Hezbollah. There's a mention here and there. But how is Israel changing the situation, particularly in Lebanon?
Well, as Paul said in his report, a major shift. Israel Katz, the defense minister in Israel, he wants to permanently change the security situation in the north. And Israel intends to have a security zone all the way from Israel's northern border up to what's called the Litani River, a geographical barrier there in Lebanon. And that's going to sort of resurrect what had happened since 1982 to 2000. Israel had that security zone. And Israel Katz says they're going to maintain this new zone even after the war ends. And he says that if Lebanon doesn't stop Hezbollah, Israel will. Right now, they're eliminating the stockpile of weapons that Hezbollah has been building up for decades. And they're actually destroying some of this infrastructure in the Hezbollah villages in southern Lebanon. And the goal ultimately, Andrew, is to ultimately eliminate Hezbollah as a threat to northern Israel. And it's also going to help free Lebanon, that's really been in the grip of Hezbollah and its sponsor, Iran, for many, many years. So we could see, as the major battlefield is going on in Iran, a really substantial change in Lebanon and in Israel once Hezbollah is taken care of.
Chris, final question. As you certainly know, tonight is the start of Passover. And with this war raging, how are Jewish people seeing this Passover this year?
Well, they're sensing a profound parallel, Andrew. You know, at Passover, God delivered the people of Israel from Pharaoh, as recorded in the book of Exodus. And people here in Israel and Jews around the world, they're going to celebrate what's called the Seder meal. They're going to be remembering that deliverance. And at the Seder meal, there's an order of service. They call that Haggadah. Now, one line in the Haggadah says, in every generation, they will rise up against us to destroy us. And just like today, Andrew, Israel has been surrounded by enemies who have sworn to destroy Israel. And as I mentioned, October 7th was the darkest day in Israel's modern history. Now, about 2.5 years later, Israel is on the cusp of seeing all of those enemies defeated. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and the main enemy, Iran. So many people here in Israel are sensing freedom from its enemies. Last night in his address to the nation, Prime Minister Netanyahu laid out his 10 accomplishments, almost like the 10 plagues. And he said Iran was once trying to strangle Israel. Now Israel, with the help of the United States, is strangling it. He also said that finally the world has woken up to the danger of Iran. And also the U.S. is partnered shoulder to shoulder with Israel. And as we've talked about, forming new alliances in the region. At the beginning, also at this war, Andrew, people were celebrating Purim, another holiday of deliverance. And Passover is another reminder that God seems to be processing of saving the Jewish people once again. So here in Israel, and I believe Jewish people around the world, as well as many believers, are sensing that this war is really having an impact to help save the people of Israel.
All right, everyone, that is CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell. Chris, as always, thanks for being with us today on the 700 Club.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right, everyone, the war with Iran is also affecting China because China imports most of its oil from Tehran. But there is debate over what impact the war is having beyond oil. One expert sees the Trump doctrine undermining China's plan for world domination. CBN senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright has the story.
As the U.S. military bombards Iranian targets, the world watches and waits to see how it will all end. China, the top adversary of the United States, has a lot riding on the outcome. China expert Gordon Chang, author of Plan Red, China's project to destroy America, says while oil gets most of the attention, he believes the broader implications are much larger. Chang sees a more sinister role between the two countries because China helped Iran build key parts of its nuclear program by working through Pakistan's father of the nuclear bomb.
For instance, it's got its centrifuges through the AQ Khan black market network of Pakistan. But AQ Khan was really a paw for China because he was peddling Chinese technology. And of course, Beijing knew what he was doing. So one can say that the Iranian program is really sort of the Chinese program transplanted to the Gulf region.
The Trump administration says Iran's refusal to stop its nuclear ambitions by enriching uranium and building more ballistic missiles led to the current conflict. Chang says that defiance is Iran's alliance with China to keep conflict alive against the U.S. and Israel, using proxies throughout the Middle East.
China is trying to convince the world that it is a responsible partner with regard to proliferation. And clearly, China has been the world's master proliferator of nuclear weapons technology, much of it to Iran. And it was not just the centrifuges, Kelly, it was also China's plans for warheads. So this really is a comprehensive program on the part of the Chinese regime to use the spread of that technology to accomplish its own goals.
According to Chang, China seeks to replace the United States and dominate both economically and militarily as the world's top superpower.
The president is going to be visiting with Xi Jinping, as you know, in an upcoming trip to China. What will these two men have to discuss in terms of China's penchant for, or at least its appetite for disrupting its neighbors, including Taiwan, and even its threat to the United States?
I think President Trump needs to say in no uncertain terms to the Chinese leader that the United States will defend Taiwan and we will defend ourselves and our friends and allies. Xi Jinping is really arrogant. And I think that through the end of last year, he actually believed that he could push President Trump around. That changed on January 3rd when Trump extracted Maduro and his wife from Caracas, and of course, with the attack on Iran. But this is still a very arrogant Chinese mentality right now.
President Trump had planned to meet with President Xi in March. Due to the military conflict with Iran, he rescheduled his visit to May. Kelly Wright, CBN News.
Thank you for that report, Kelly.